I'm John Dennis. I'm running against Nancy Pelosi.
We have the most beautiful state and one of the most beautiful places in the world, and people are leaving.
I'm gonna catch you when all the cameras aren't around, and I'm gonna you up. I'm tired.
He's the chairman of the San Francisco GOP, and he's running against House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Step back, everyone.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the John Dennis Report. Thanks for joining us today. Happy to have you here. I'm going to cover a little bit of Pelosi today. It's funny, after years of living in San Francisco and having Nancy Pelosi as my congresswoman and opponent and de facto leader of the the Democrat Party in San Francisco and the machine that drives San Francisco, I got to say, I don't look forward to talking about her. It's a nuisance. It's one of those things that really, bugs you because it directly affects the quality of your life here. And, there are people who don't get it when I say that Nancy Pelosi is largely responsible for the condition of San Francisco. And they say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're running for Congress and you don't understand how it works. And because Pelosi doesn't run the city. Okay, well, what those people don't understand is that San Francisco gets a large chunk of money from the federal government. And that Pelosi brings that money to the city. City relies on that money. She has money that is earmarked alone just for homelessness. That has nothing to do with all the other earmarks that she gets for the city, for infrastructure and everything else. An enormous amount of federal money comes to San Francisco. That in and of itself gives her massive amounts of power in this town. Add on to that she has been in Democrat politics since the early 80s. I think the story is that she got involved in California Democrat politics in the early 80s, just as her kids were getting old enough so that she could start doing some, outside the home stuff. She's clearly, was a political animal. Her dad was the mayor of Baltimore. She spent a lot of time around that. And what's remarkable to me about Pelosi is just right at the beginning how she managed to take over. There are people right now who are plotting their strategy to become the chairman or chairwoman of the California Republican Party. There are men and women who are plotting their strategy to become chairman or chairwoman of the California Democratic Party. Pelosi got involved in politics, and within like a year, she was the chairwoman of the California Democratic Party. That's a pretty amazing thing. And that goes back to the early 80s. She's been in Congress since 1987 when they held a special election. And, she's been in some position of power in the Democratic regime in California since the early 80s. So you tell me if she doesn't have outsized influence on San Francisco politics and what's happening here. And what people don't also get is that just when Nancy Pelosi comes to town and when she summons people and she wants to talk to people, you can rest assured that they come running. Even the Democratic Central Committee, which is actually fairly powerful in this town. Like, for example, these people who are giving us so much trouble if you follow the news about our problems with the Board of Education, not opening the schools and changing the names, the Democratic Central Committee in San Francisco, they used to be sort of moderate, and then they've switched over, and now they're run by progressives. Even the progressive Democratic Central Committee would endorse Nancy Pelosi, even though she's considered a corporate Democrat by those guys. They endorse her. They wouldn't dare go against her in any way possible. So when you think about it, her impact on local San Francisco politics. If you don't get that, then please don't lecture me. You just don't know what you're talking about. I live in this town, but she's so when I have to look into her, it just has this. I have this sort of visceral response because she is responsible for people living on the streets in San Francisco. She's responsible for people, shooting up drugs. In San Francisco yesterday, somebody said celebrities should be out there, showing showing themselves getting vaccinations, showing them getting needles put in their arms. And I wrote in a tweet back, if you want to see people who aren't celebrities getting needles in their arm, come to San Francisco. And then all of a sudden, this deluge of posts started coming in from people in San Francisco showing, poor souls sleeping on our streets, laying on our streets, shooting up, or, laying around sleeping with, needles in their arms. This is Nancy Pelosi's legacy. This is what she's done to San Francisco. And what's remarkable to me is that given the amount of power that she's had in Washington, that she has yet to make the rest of the United States look like what San Francisco's like. But believe you me, it's coming if they continue to do what they do. And there's a sort of a situation now where Pelosi has been very. I mean, she's always been bold and felt like she was untouchable. We got to pull up, Mario, one of these days. We got to pull up that 60 Minutes segment from, I think it's 2013 or 2011, I think, when she did the insider trading or the alleged insider trading on the Visa stock. Remember to pull up that press conference.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, it's with it's a 60 Minutes press conference with Steve Croft. And Pelosi just she never answers the question. Finally, a mainstream media outfit is pushing back on Pelosi, and she doesn't. She's just like she's offended that they're even asking the question. Meanwhile, she and her husband just made like $800,000 or something like that on a stock that they held for like a day. It was ridiculous. So in any event, fast forward to this year, and now that Biden's in charge, I think this weekend it just sort of occurred to me, if your kid has a criminal element bent, like if you could tell your kid's a bad seed, but he or she's got some intelligence and wants to go into a life of crime, absolutely, by all means, make them become politicians, because they're going to be successful criminals in politics. Because now, if you're on and make them Democrat politicians, because if you're a Democrat in Washington, you can get away with just about anything. I mean, really stupid stuff, like that guy in San Diego, the Republican in San Diego, did, using like campaign funds and office funds. Don't do stuff like that. No, do insiders trading stuff, because that you're going to get away. You're going to get away with. Have your kids go overseas and do deals like Hunter Biden did. You're not, and let them do deals, and then you get kickback. So have your son or daughter, whoever it is that you're sending over to do these deals, pay for your expenses so that people can't see, where the money, how the money's ending up getting funneled to you. These are ways where you are untouchable. If you have the criminal mind and you want to, you want to get away with it, just become a Democrat in Washington. And in or out of power, they seem to get away with it, because the Republicans didn't do anything to them, while they were in office. I mean, Trump tried to, and they attacked him. They impeached him for it. So let's move over here to this. Keep in mind, Pelosi did that Visa stock trade in 2000, I guess at 11, I think, and then fast forward to now, and this is great guy Mish. Actually, I used to talk. Mish Shedlock. I used to talk to Mish from time to time. One of the smart economic guys. A couple of my buddies who were stockbrokers used to talk to Mish, or used to worship Mish. They were all like sort of subscribers to his newsletter and his website, because his information was absolutely invaluable. Mish, who doesn't miss a trick, went through the disclosures for something that we should be doing on my campaign team. Going through Pelosi's stock transactions for her husband. And there was one that came up not long ago, where just before a big announcement came up that the federal government under the Biden administration was going to be making an investment, a large investment in a fleet of electric vehicles. The Pelosi family, Nancy Pelosi's husband, bought a ton of Tesla stock, and then it went up, and then he sold it. Now that one, people are like, a lot of people are buying Tesla stock. That's not that big a deal, and the fleet isn't that big considering the number of cars that Tesla is selling these days. I would disagree. I would say, and also they were saying, I would disagree just because when you buy that many cars in the federal government, that it helps to build out and encourages the build out of Tesla charging station infrastructure. So that in and of itself would make the Tesla stock more valuable. And Mish covers this, by the way, in this this article that he wrote. And Mario, let's put this the link to this article up wherever we post this video, okay?
Sure thing.
Thanks. So so here we go. Yeah, thanks. I'm going to put this up. So, but this one, leave it here. I want to read it because I got to take a look at it. I want to scroll. So, but this is really bad. So, so Pelosi's husband buys. Now this is a separate transaction. This just happened recently in March. Pelosi's husband buys a bunch of stock in MSFT, Microsoft, and then RBLX, Roblox, right? And he also bought, exercised some options to buy a certain amount of shares. Microsoft shares since that time have climbed from $230 to $255 a share, an increase of close to 11%, after the company secured a lucrative contract worth nearly $22 billion to supply U.S. Army combat troops with augmented reality headsets. The deal was announced on March 31st. So let's go back through the transaction again. Pelosi buys, it's her financial filing, so her husband presumably did the purchase, but she has to show that she bought this much stock on March 19th, March 10th for the other one, and then something else on AB on February 23rd. But it's really these two trades that we're looking at here. The two trades on March 19th for Microsoft. Microsoft on March 19th, they buy them at $230 a share. On March 31st, a deal was announced that the federal government was giving a $22 billion contract to Microsoft. On March 31st, the shares go up, and then the Pelosi's sell them. So that's the way it works. And there was a thing that was happening. Part of the 60 Minutes report from 2011 said there were no laws on the books preventing members of Congress from using insider information to do stock trades. And that was, a problem because, like, for example, in the Visa circumstance, Visa was going public. There was legislation on their on the docket, that was going to impact the credit card business, and it was going to impact the value of the IPO for Visa. And so when companies go public, many of you know this probably, they have an option and an ability to go ahead and give out what's called friends and family shares. Usually they're in fairly small allotments, 500 shares each, that sort of thing. But friends and family shares are a regular thing. Pelosi and her family, who have no connection, no friends or family. Well, they may have friends there, but no family in Visa. They didn't have any. They weren't instrumental in any way to Visa. Visa's massive success over the years. But for some reason, Visa just out of the blue decides to give the Pelosi clan some shares just before they go public. They get the shares. They didn't have to put up, I don't think they put up any money. No, they were just given the shares. And then unlike founder shares, which when you go public, you have to hold for 6 months, the friends and family shares you didn't have to hold. So within a few hours, the Visa stock went public. It went up, and the Pelosi sold it for I think they made like $500,000 in a day with no money out of pocket. It's pretty remarkable, and of course, no consequences. And now we have this very dodgy looking situation with Microsoft, and no consequences again, and no one even talking about it. I mean, Mish brings it up. A couple of other people brought it up, not on mainstream media. I noticed Fox finally did an article about it the other day. Mish published this on April 13th. And anyway, so there you go. There's Nancy Pelosi, paragon of virtue, leading the way, and just ripping you off continuously. And I got to say, this is really discouraging in this day and age when we have these kinds of tools available to us, and we can disseminate information about people doing bad things so easily now. And there's no consequences. There are no consequences for people like Pelosi. They just do. The only consequence is hopefully you vote them out of office. She's got a very solid seat. That's one of the reasons why I run against her, is to point this sort of stuff out. So when I go see the Chronicle, I'm going to ask them why, because I'll go in eventually and talk to them, but I'm going to ask them, why don't they run articles about this sort of thing? I mean, this is corruption, right? Smeared right in their face. And they don't do anything about it. They don't even ask the question. I mean, look, if they asked the question and, if they said, it was a little too thin, but at least ask the question, put the pressure on her, make her defend herself. And then, ask, and then, put it out there, and then the Department of Justice can do what it wants with it at that point. But at least the Chronicle can feel like they did their job. But the truth is that, for many years, and I know a bunch of guys at the Chronicle, people who I like, and I don't want to beat up on them too much because, they're sort of considered right-wing by the Democratic Party in this town, which is crazy. But one thing I will say about the Chronicle is they never challenge Pelosi. They never challenge her. They challenged Feinstein. They do not challenge Nancy Pelosi, ever. Never once. I've never seen it. When Pelosi wouldn't debate, when Feinstein wouldn't debate one of her opponents back, some years ago, the Chronicle wrote an editorial about it and said, hey, Feinstein, you should debate. They have never done that for Nancy Pelosi. Do you think it would kill Nancy Pelosi one time? Last time she debated somebody was, I think, 1994, 92 or 94. That's almost 30 years ago. Anyway, I'm going to put it to the Chronicle and say, hey, listen, why aren't you guys doing some reporting on this? Or are they in the business of kissing Pelosi's ass? Is that their deal? Okay, let's move on. But I'm going to move on to a different topic here. But it is Pelosi related, so let's continue that. So here's an interesting little thing. One of the things that Pelosi said was that she was not going to stay in the speaker's position beyond 2022. She made that deal. She's made it more than once with the progressives, in order to resecure the speaker's position. And however, the Chronicle writes an article about it. This is about as critical as they get to Pelosi. It's actually not a critical article, but they kind of looked into her. And the title of the article is, "Will Nancy Pelosi Call It Quits? Here's one way to tell." And we can't scroll through the article because I don't have the subscription to the Chronicle because I just can't. Anyway, it's another story. I just can't support all these newspapers, especially ones that give a point of view that's not in sync with my own. But one of the things they talk about in the article is that she's still out there fundraising like crazy. They say that Pelosi has raised $1 billion for the Democrats since, I think, 2010 or something like that. $1 billion. Now, I got to say something. I'm not so sure that she hasn't raised indirectly $1 billion for the Republicans. Because think about how many Republicans, every email that you get for a new person running for office or for an incumbent Republican running for Congress, they all say, my opponent is, connected to the hip to Nancy Pelosi, specifically the challengers running against Democrats. My opponent votes 90% with Nancy Pelosi. My opponent votes 85% with Nancy Pelosi. My opponent votes, 95% with Nancy Pelosi. I used to make a joke. There's one thing I can guarantee you. My opponent votes 100% of the time with Nancy Pelosi. Anyway, we have, so she's out there raising money. Now, why is that a sign that she's going to run again? Because if she wasn't going to run again, she wouldn't give a damn. She wouldn't care about how much money was being raised. She wouldn't be out there raising money for people. She'd be like, I did my gig. It's time to move on. No, she's out there hustling. So this is a strong indication that she's going to stay in. I personally think, I thought she would resign in 2010 after the Democrats got crushed by the Republicans. Biggest sweep in, the biggest turnover in congressional history, House history. 63 seats were won by the Republicans in 2010. And under those circumstances, every other House Speaker in previous, landslides, losers of landslides, resigned. Newt Gingrich resigned after he lost the Speaker's position in the, I think they won it back in 94, and I think he lost it again in 98, and he resigned. And so, they typically resign. Pelosi didn't. So that was the last time I predicted that she was going to leave. My suspicion, I'm not making a hard call here, but my suspicion is that she's never going to leave. I think, from what I understand from sources within her circles, is that she lives for this. She's going to keep driving the Pelosi agenda, which whatever that is, which is really just having some sort of control and influence on what happens in Washington, D.C. She's going to continue to do that till she drops. She's got nowhere else to go. This is her passion. This is what she loves in life, and what drives her forward. And so I think she's going to continue to move on, even though she's going to be 82 next year. Weird thing, she has the same birthday as my daughter. That's odd. So Pelosi will be. Pelosi looks like she's running. She's going to run again, and she's going to stay out there. And I can't imagine that she's not going to renege on her word about running as Speaker, just because I can't imagine she runs again and is a backbencher. Doesn't make any sense. Okay, moving on. Let's move on to the other thing. I was funny. I was got a call. I was out early Saturday morning. And I got a call. I was at my club, and I got a call from Fox News. They wanted me to comment on something, so I gave them a comment.
The vast majority of that group, we are told, are prisoners who
shouldn't have been doing it. But in any event, and the commentary was about Newsom's nephew through marriage. Pelosi's nephew through marriage. Gavin Newsom was, after releasing a bunch of prisoners earlier, is now going to release another 76,000 felons back into San Francisco. 76,000, including repeat violent criminals. And can we cue up that segment, my response about that?
Sure thing.
Yeah, just my response. It's not very long. It's only about 10 seconds or so, and I'll tell you what I thought about it.
Early release. Christina.
Arthel, reaction is pouring in from Republicans on this. San Francisco's GOP party chair says these changes are dangerous.
Think about San Francisco. We have, murders are up in San Francisco, burglaries, home invasions are up in San Francisco, and now we're going to take repeat violent criminals and put them back out on the streets. It's almost as if they have a blueprint for the destruction of a state.
Yeah. So yeah, that's good. Thanks. What I was saying is it's almost as if they have a blueprint for the destruction of a state. Keep in mind that California passed Prop 47 some years ago, which allows people to steal up to $950, and it's only a misdemeanor, and so nobody even bothers prosecuting it. It's led to the closure of lots of chain, pharmacies, CVS's, Walgreens. A bunch of them have closed, particularly in places like San Francisco and LA, because they can't endure, the loss of merchandise, the property loss, and the police don't prosecute, and people just get away with it. In fact, people will go into some of these stores with calculators, and they load up their cart, and they get to that threshold, just under $950, and then they walk out, and nobody does anything about it. And so, we're basically, encouraging people to become petty criminals in that sense. So we have low-level criminals who can make a living just stealing stuff and fencing it. And then you have high-level criminals who are mostly probably socio and psychopaths, who are repeat violent offenders. We're going to put them back out on the street. I mean, it's dystopic. It's insane. It sort of reminds me of like that Batman movie when they just take over and the lunatics are holding mock trials of people, just to make and killing people who are in authority. I mean, this is what we're moving towards. I mean, it's as if, and here's my point in this, it's as if they're using a blueprint to destroy a state. They're raising taxes. They are, keeping the schools closed so that kids can't get educated. I mean, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. California has become a disaster. By the way, we have had a dry season here. We have our rainy season in California is fairly well defined. November 1st through April 30th. That 6 months is when we get 90+% of our rain. And it's been a dry year. We didn't hit our numbers. And we've had high winds already. So by August, we are going to be see forest fires. And what they do, by the way, to prevent the fires from happening is they mandate that because they're concerned that electrical lines cause the fires through faulty wiring or whatever sparks that come from them. They require that electricity get turned off, and we have these rolling blackouts throughout the state. So, I mean, I don't know. I've been to some third world countries that manage to keep the lights on, and California can't. So California cannot keep its lights on. Our entire state will be covered with smoke. We'll be inhaling smoke for months. We've got petty thieves killing stores, stealing at will. We've got violent repeat criminals being let out to the state. We're the highest taxed state in the union. People are leaving in droves. It costs 4 times as much to rent a U-Haul to leave California than it does to bring one in. That tells you how many people are leaving California. And it is a dystopia. It is a dystopia that they would like to inflict on the rest of the country. This is the Pelosi agenda. This is what Nancy Pelosi would like to do for the rest of America. This is the ambition and what the kind of America Gavin Newsom would have liked to have brought if he had been a viable candidate in 2024. But thank goodness it looks like that's all but over. So anyway, on that dour note, let me just wind down and say that's what I've been thinking lately. It's as if they're really trying to destroy California. I don't think they are. They think they are just caught up in an ideology that they can't get out of because their ideology is what's in vogue. It gives them power, and they have to follow it, irrespective of what the outcome is. And that's where we're at right now. And that's why we need change, and that's why I'm running for Congress. That's why I hope people are politically active. They've got to stay on top of this stuff. They've got to drive out the bad folks. There was a great can you put that GOP sweep part, Mario? It was a great little story here about how the GOP sweeps in Texas election, a city revolts against Biden-backed critical race theory in schools. This is really encouraging. I don't know the demographic of that district, but I do know it's a Dallas suburb. and suburbs, particularly women in suburbs, white women in suburbs, have been, driving liberal guilt that's led to progressives taking over school boards, which apparently was the case. People turned out in droves to crush critical race theory in school and crush the progressives at the ballot box. And that's a great sign, but we need to do this all across the country, everywhere, and take on the roughest fights, like running against Nancy Pelosi, which people have said to me is far and away the most difficult congressional race in America for a Republican to run against Nancy Pelosi. But we got to take on these fights because it's the only way that we turn things around. We can't run away. Listen, you have to move from time to time, but the truth is that lots of places that have been traditionally red have been turning over the last few years, and there are really fewer and fewer places to run. So you have to take a stand where you live, and that's what we're doing here, and that's what we try to do every day here on the John Dennis Report. Thanks for joining us, appreciate it, and I hope you can do us the kind favor of pounding the subscribe button on YouTube. Just punch it hard enough so that maybe your whole family feels it. Pound that subscribe button on YouTube at the John Dennis Report, also on Facebook, John Dennis Report. And then please, by all means, follow us on both Instagram and Twitter at Real John Dennis. Thanks for joining us today. We will see you tomorrow.